Welcome to the Dragonfly Rising podcast. I am your host, Dr. Tami Dean. Thank you for joining me today as we continue to work together to make a difference. Let's explore how we can use our voice today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dragonfly Rising podcast with me, your host, Dr. Tami Dean. I am beyond excited today for our podcast guest. Today we have with us Gabriell Gater. She is the founder and CEO of Innovative Learners. They're an amazing tutoring agency that helps students with reading, writing, and math, embedded with culturally relevant instruction. So we know, love that. We're excited about that. And I cannot wait to dig into what she does and what she has done and is doing and all the great things today. So welcome, Gabriell.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. I'm very excited to talk about that.
Me too, y'all. You know how I feel about diverse text, and Gabriell is also.
Yes.
We're going to dig into that a little bit here today as well. But Gabriell, I really wanted to start, because I start every episode with my guests wanting to hear a little bit about your equity journey, because I believe it's a marathon, right, versus a sprint, and we all start somewhere and have this unique trajectory. So tell us a little bit about your personal equity work journey.
Absolutely. And I love how you kind of started off as equity work, because that's essentially what it is. But my mother was a teacher, and I always, still to this day, think it's such a sacred position to be in front of students and be able to pour into them. It can change the trajectory of their lives, either for the positive or the negative. So I take it very seriously. And I finally got the opportunity to pursue that. And so I was teaching. I've lived a lot of places. I'm originally from Texas. And so I started teaching in Houston. I didn't want to tell anybody I was a first year teacher, any stigmas and things like that. But no lesson plan, no coach. It was just, they threw me in there.
That's what they do, unfortunately.
That's how they do you. That's how they do you. But I loved it. I actually loved it because I got I had the ability to be as creative. And so because I had no background, I had, tutored and things like that, but I led with me wanting to be the teacher that I never had as a Black girl growing up in Texas, where all my teachers were white and me and my friend was the only two Black girls in the class. So I led with that. And so I've just consistently let that lead my decision making. So from Houston, I always want to push things and do things to the max. I was like, I want to go to New York. I want to live in Harlem. I want to work in Harlem so I can be a better teacher. And everybody thought I was crazy. I don't have any family in New York. I just moved out there. And I
love it. We love a little crazy,
Crazy.
I love it.
Crazy. My mom was like, don't smile at nobody. But it was amazing. I was so glad. And also I taught at a school, Harlem Children's Zone, where it was a holistic teaching method, right? Everybody was Black. The owner was Black. I had never experienced this wraparound kind of the way the charter system works, so they would provide health care and things like that. However, I still found discrepancies within the curriculum because it didn't reflect the students that I was giving it to. And my favorite example of this is I was teaching a child and he's like, Miss, what's a lawn? Because he lives in New York and they don't have lawns there. And I explained to him what it was, but if I wasn't there in that classroom, he would have got that whole passage wrong. And I can imagine that has happened in many other situations in many other classrooms. And as a teacher, there's just no time to teach how you want to, what you want to, the books you want to, what your kids need, especially if you have a curriculum that's given to you. Or if you decide to create your own curriculum, there's no space for you to actually do that and be a successful teacher. So I kind of led with frustration into my equity work. I was like, I can't get it in this classroom, so I'm gonna get it for myself,
Yeah.
And my tutoring agency wasn't supposed to be this grand business that it is now. I just saw an old white man at a library tutoring somebody. I was like, I could do that.
Right? Yes.
And on Craigslist, you got to make an icon to list your services. So I just made a little quick logo so I could be on Craigslist, and it just took off from there.
On Craigslist. Oh, we're going way back.
Way back.
Okay, so I'm curious, is this the same icon you have now? Like, has it stuck the whole time, or have you innovated it?
I kept it for like 2 years. I innovated it for a year, and now we got a different.
I love that though, like the trajectory of growth, right?
Yeah. But the name was the same. The name has been the same. So from there, it just grew into this beautiful. I didn't realize how much autonomy and agency I was giving to myself. And because that, I could continue to lead with being the teacher for Black and Brown students that I know they need and may not be getting. So now I was able to do that for nationwide, really internationally as well. And so it just grew from there. And 2022, I made the decision to move to Chicago so I could pursue the business full time. And 2020 happened. We went 100% virtual. So we have a team of teachers who are, like, I was going to put this in an Instagram post, but I feel like if you're a parent and you feel like your child's favorite teacher left the classroom, they're probably in my program. Okay.
You should make that post. Totally. Like, come back and find your kid's favorite teacher.
Exactly. They come here. Okay.
I love that though, because what that means is, right. And I think this is really important because I think sometimes people think teachers leave the classroom because they're not passionate about the work. And I actually think a lot of times it's because they're so passionate about the work and what they believe is best for kids. And there's so many other political pressures, business pressures, right, coming down on educators where they're not seen as the professionals able to make all these great decisions that you're talking about, like choosing the right text, like, and especially right now, because this pendulum is shifting so far towards like scripted curriculum. Yeah. And that really just takes away the ability for educators to respond in the way that kids need and to really differentiate and support their needs. Like, I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but like, yes. Yeah. So back to, right? Like teachers don't always leave the classroom because they don't want to be a teacher. They're just trying to find other ways to do what it is that matters for kids.
Exactly. And be a human,
Yeah. What? Teachers are human?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Whenever people ask me, I'm like, I can go to the bathroom whenever I want now. So, because, when you teach, you've got 3 minutes in between passing periods, So it's just like little things like that. It's so freeing. And like you said, the way that politically it is, I would not have made it. I teach middle school, but my mother is a college professor and she talked to us like adults. I'm not good at sugarcoating things like this is what happened. And I can explain it in a way they understand, But yeah, I can't, it's not fair to them,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Because I just feel like there's such a deficit mindset around kids and their ability and their agency. And, when we think about, I'm going to jump for just one second, but when you think about, right, in diverse texts and they represent all this life. And like, I feel like people often think that students don't live in the world and experience the world and have things happening in their life and seeing things, right? They don't walk around in a little bubble where not like they are a part of it and things are happening to them and they have feelings and they have family, And when we ignore all of these things, we're missing out. Like we're missing the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Like
I agree. You're not teaching, you're doing a monologue. Like I've been in classes where they're like, I went to a job and I taught and I did a demo lesson and they're like, the lesson was great, but why didn't you read the script? I was like, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted me to like, no, like some schools really just want you to be there and read what they say. And they train the children to respond and sit like, cross-legged. And I mean, call and response is cool, but also like, know what I'm saying? these are
I do. That's why I'm
individuals.
laughing right now. I know you all can't see me, but I'm laughing right now. Yes, because when it's an authentic call and response, right? Like,
Hey, like at
oh,
church, that's cool. Respond how you want to respond, but they're like, "Mom,
or
y'all."
even students are really excited and engaged in a lesson, and they're like, "Oh my God, Dr. Dean, that's
Yes,
do you know that made me think of
yes,
this and this?" Like the
yes.
ability for students to bring in connections, like
Us.
bring in their funds and knowledge, bring in the connections. Like
Yes.
that is how we learn as humans. We are not robots. We are not assembly lines. And I am concerned how we're moving in that direction. This idea of, fidelity, and talked a little bit about this with Dr. Katrina Linger from UW Oshkosh, where we were talking about the scripted literacy curriculum and how it's taking away the ability for people to have culturally responsive instruction and to be creative in their instruction, like all these things that you were just talking about. I want to empower educators with, in spite of, right? I want to think of it like this way: in spite of these things that are coming at you, you still have a voice and agency to try it, to integrate some of these components and pieces as best you can, right?
Yes.
I'm here. This work is important to me because to me, it's advocating for educators, which at the end of the day is advocating for students.
Yeah. And it's a calling on you. And I feel like you're not moving in your purpose if you are trying to read from a script. And it also, when you are able to be vulnerable with students, when students feel seen in your classroom, and that doesn't mean hip hop in the ABCs. I'm talking about students feel like authentically able to be themselves. You cannot teach that child if they don't trust you. So in order for them to receive whatever academic instruction you're going to give to them, you have to make them feel like this is a safe space for them. And we use that term a lot, but that's how you create those spaces. And so then they also feel safe to make mistakes. At the beginning of all of my tutoring sessions with my children and other teachers as well, we always start the first 10 minutes. We're not teaching. We are checking in with students. We are building that rapport. We are following up, because if something is on that child's mind, if you don't acknowledge that, that's the only thing they're going to be thinking about. If something in the lesson could trigger what happened that you didn't cover because you didn't uncover it in the first place. I tell you what, when I used to teach in Harlem, I teach in Harlem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We would second semester, I started every class. I would turn the lights off and we would meditate, because I even want you to shed anything that happened in the last class or anything that happened in lunch. So it's kind of like a reset,
Yeah.
So it's very important and necessary, because once you do that, forget the bell, forget your bell ringer. You only have 45 minutes. In order to make that time impactful, you have to remember that you are teaching human beings,
Interested in learning more and getting a customized plan for you or your educators? Sign up for a free connection call with me, Dr. Tami, to discuss your personalized plan. The link is in the show notes. Yes, they are human beings. Absolutely. And absolutely. I think that's so important. I think we sometimes miss both in the focus on the academic, recognizing that you can't get deep in the academic, like you said, if there's all this other stuff happening. And I try to remind adults, children are smaller, younger humans. So think about how challenging it is as an adult to sometimes be in a space, maybe to go teach for the day. Maybe something really powerful is happening in your own personal life. The challenge of going in to teach and trying to put that in the back of your mind, that's hard. That's hard as an adult person.
Yeah.
So how do you think and make consideration for your young, emerging, learning humans,
Mhm.
right? The same. And gosh, isn't meditation great for all of us? Like, doesn't that
Come
help
on
us
now.
as an adult person too?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
let me just reframe. I love that how you said a fresh start.
Yeah. Yeah.
Each class is a fresh start. Each
Yeah.
day is a fresh start.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important with engaging as students because it's really easy to try to
It is.
hold on to
Mhm.
something that happened and almost expecting perfection out of children that are children,
Yep.
number one.
Yep.
But number two, they're
Yep.
human and none of us are perfection.
Right. 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 And acknowledging that. And I also want to make sure that people, when we say easy, I don't want people to think that I got up there and led the class in meditation every day. That's not what happened. Okay. It would be the same 3 little YouTube videos on rotation. Yeah, I played that. And then kids get used to the structure. So there are cues, and
Mhm.
humans are we're the same way. When I'm at my desk, that means it's time to work. So I just want to preface, I don't want people to think like, oh, I'm this, holistic. I would do a guided I ain't doing all of that, because sometimes I need to sit at my desk and
Yes.
reset.
Yes. But I think that's a really powerful tip, right? Like build an, a comfortable system that you can
Yes.
use effectively, efficiently, repeatedly, and it builds familiarity and comfort and comes back to that safe space you were talking about and building like I can anticipate. I know what's
Mhm.
coming.
Mhm. Yes.
And because I know what's coming and it's consistent, maybe I can let some of my
Yeah.
walls down
Yeah.
and let you in a little bit. Let's talk some more about your your tutoring, what you do in your tutoring business there, how you integrate
Yes.
culturally responsive teaching. So
Yes.
tell me all the things.
Yes. So everything I'm saying, like that's exactly what we do in all of our sessions, whether I'm teaching them or not, because it's built into the curriculum. So those brain breaks, those wiggle breaks, the best part, the most affirming part, and honestly, the part that I feel like makes students grow so much is the fact that it is culturally relevant. And so it's reflective of them. The kids are seeing images of themselves as far as kindergarten, we go all the way up to high schoolers, and it's sparking curiosity. So in my program, students will grow at least 3 reading levels within 12 weeks. Some kids grow 5. And it is a transformative program. And I know I'm biased because I'm the owner and founder, but I'm the one. I test every single kid that comes into the program. I do a reading test with them, and then I test them every 3 months. And when I first started doing it, I was like, okay, very nervous. But even to this day, I have so much data that shows that it still doesn't like that's the best part of it to see these kids grow and to be able to read books and words that they were not able to before. And we're also instilling in them self-confidence
Mm-hmm.
because now, I mean, once you have established that I can just do something confidently at that age, that can catapult you into so many possibilities. My first child, my first student, he was undiagnosed dyslexia. He was in second grade, reading on a kindergarten level, and he's still in the program to this day. And he reads better than almost everybody he's in a different class now. Um,
Right.
but it's beautiful because not only does he have this self-confidence, he wants to be an architect. He wants to do all of these things. His parents are feeding that into him. But also he's sharing his light with other kids that he sees are also struggling just like he
Mm.
was. And verbalizing that. There's so much emotion that goes into the classroom. Kids just say things without them ever being prompted, and I'm shocked every single time. And so I started recording it, and like this last year, I started like putting little snippets of it on my Instagram.
Yeah.
Um, oh my gosh! But the most beautiful thing was I had a group of middle schoolers, and they were not, they're all kind of reading on different levels, and they were all male. And the benefit of my program also is that I don't group students by, okay, this is a fifth grade class, a fourth grade class. I group them by level and age appropriateness. So everybody is on the same level. So there is just no stigma where such and such is reading better than such and such. And, kids feel comfortable to practice reading. And we just got done with the session, and these kids are like, they're 13-year-old male, reading isn't cool. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I do. I used to teach middle school.
We're here. And so we're logging off, and he's like, okay, I love you guys. And I was like, oh my gosh. That it just because that's how vulnerable and that's how comfortable we made this space. And so that also is a part of being culturally responsive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Learning is a collaborative experience, and we're able to create that in ways that the modern classroom is getting further and further away from. And once you have that child who's able to feel comfortable, it's kind of like you've got the wound open up. Now you can put the medicine in so it can heal, So our medicine is our like reading methods and the text that we pick out. And, kids are reading also not just about things in the past, but things that are happening right now in the future. So they'll also know that they're an active part of history. And we talk about, incorporating technology. And so like all of these topics. So it is engaging for them. And it sparks curiosity and they want to learn more about it. So I love, it's like the ideal classroom,
Yes. Yes. I appreciate that. And I hope one of the takeaways people really hear is that I think sometimes people think culturally relevant needs to be this like huge thing, but it really starts with building that community, the safe space, integrating meaningful connections with your students, right? Like I always say, be wary of like, I just picked this book because there's a brown person in there. And it is, do a little work around the authenticity
Yes.
around that, right? Like it's more than just picking the book because there's a black or brown person in the book or an Asian person in the book or an indigenous person in the book. Y'all, okay, so you got to go deeper than that, right? Like,
thank you.
Like, I appreciate if you've started there. Now think about how do you really go deeper and ask the meaningful questions there. So, I love that.
Thank you.
And here's what I think is super powerful. When kids get to see themselves as a reader, because I think especially when you get to middle school kids, they've almost been told for so long that they are not capable of being a reader. So I was a middle school teacher and I was working on my master's degree and was doing action research around culturally relevant texts. And I was, my sixth grade, we were all the way like 10th grade reading level, second grade reading level. Like,
yeah, I get you. I was there. I get you.
The whole gamut, right? But bringing in books, we actually read like Bud Not Buddy. This was part of my
mine too.
master's research. We read Bud Not Buddy, and just the light from these students. And when we, did community work, there was a lot of scaffolding, but like the power of a text, they were like, where are more books like this? Right? And so when you see these kids take this on, like I had kids that I always think of this one young man in particular who was always, very hard on himself. His technical reading level when he came was like a second grade reading level, like, right? Like he jumped back up to grade level by the time he left at the end of the school year. And that's when the Goblet of Fire came out. Okay. So this young man went from not reading to walking around reading the Goblet of Fire.
Oh my gosh.
In his free time. Right? Right? This book is this big. Like
oh my gosh.
And that image just always stays with me because he's just like one example of a student and the power of feeling connection, being told you're capable.
Yes.
Being supported with ways to do that.
Yes.
And I don't even know where this young man is. I did run into one of those students in his class years later. I was working with my undergraduate alma mater. Then they had this Milana program, so where they would partner previous first gen college students with new first gen students. And I was there, and there was this guy who's doing this internship for his master's degree. And there's just something about him, right? And it didn't click. I got home, I had an email. He was one of my 6th grade students.
Oh my gosh.
And he had sent me this email about, I just enjoyed being in your class. Like, you may not remember me, but as soon as I saw his name written, I was like, oh my God, I know exactly who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Like, enter his map. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Right?
That's
so
amazing.
I just tell that story just because it
I love
matters.
That.
It just matters, y'all. You just don't even know in what way it's going to come to fruition.
Yeah. And you have to be okay with sitting with the fact that you may never know. But
this is true.
Knowing that you planted a seed and you just trust the process and, hope that no one steps on that seed after you planted it as well.
Yes.
And something else you said about Bud Not Buddy. I think when we think about culturally responsive teaching, we always focus on the cultural part, but then the responsive part. So when you hearing that your kids were like, we want more books like that. Okay. So then that's where we respond. And it really is, even like in my business, going to see what works and then altering and adjusting and changing. And being responsive is being okay to sit with change. And I feel like as teachers, we're taught, they give us a structure, like 15 minutes for this, then this. And then some people are married to that and they feel afraid to deviate. But being responsive is being okay to sit with something and say, you know what, I'm going to have to put this aside because this is something that we have to address right now. And I was going to share this in the beginning, but I will. We talk about culturally responsive teaching. I used to raise all hell about teaching these Black books and Black history. I mean, I was going hard. I taught ELA for a long time, but my last year teaching in the classroom, they're like, you know what, girl, we're going to put you in social studies since you got so much to say. And I was like, that's whatever, They're like, okay, fine. It's still reading. That's cool with me. And one of my co-teachers and friends and collaborative now, I was reaching out to her. I'd never taught social studies. So she was like, we're going to do, and she goes hard, and so she was like, we're going to do this lesson. Like the first month, we're just doing introductory, like rapport building, culture building. That's what we're doing. And different from ELA. You get maybe a week of that. So I was like, okay. So the first lesson we created was this gender identity lesson, which is a very, I was in New York, but in the South, they would have kicked me after school. And so teaching different gender identities and we made a gender person snowman so people could know like how you feel in your head, how you identify your organs, how you were at birth. So we can give kids language because even the Black and brown students that were in our class, everything is racist.
Right.
They don't know about classism. They don't know about social, so even when it comes to gender identity, people use gay as a derogatory word, just adults and children. So let's give some names to things so we understand what we're saying. And I was hesitant. I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Whatever. And so, they're not going to fire me. Y'all need teachers. That was like my mentality, my whole session of teaching.
Yeah, it's feisty. I like it.
Yeah. So it's a little problematic, but we do this.
Welcome to the club, girl.
Exactly. So we do this lesson. I'm teaching them very responsive, very respectful, because they understand this is serious. I tell you what, I had in that moment a child raise their hand. I had a couple kids crying because they were members in their family that they had not been affirmed yet. I had some students who were struggling with their identities, had not been affirmed yet. And they came to me in private and kind of expressed that to me. And 6th grader let me know how thankful they were that we were able to have this conversation because someone in their house identified and, would have never known. Also, I had a child raise their hand and was like, well, what happens if you see just asking me questions about situations they had experienced. So we had to move away from that and respond and make it kind of like an open discussion because
Mm-hmm.
these kids have so many questions and so many curiosities. And as sixth graders, instead of asking questions a lot of time because it's not necessarily built into the lesson, they'll take that curiosity, they'll take that confusion, and they'll turn it into jokes on each other back and forth if you
Mm-hmm.
don't address it about what it's supposed to be.
Right.
And I am so glad I did that in the beginning of my classroom at the beginning of the year because that set the precedent that no, you can come to me for so many things.
Yeah.
Later on, that same child in that same class, and I took her laptop from her because something was wrong with it, so she gave it to me. I opened up the laptop and it said she in her past history, how to kill yourself was in her search bar. And I was like, "Did you mean to type this?" And she was like, "I did." And so we had a conversation. I transferred it over to the counselor. Her
Mm-hmm.
mom came in. We had a whole, I was at a
Yeah.
school that was able to
Wrap
wrap
her.
around her.
Yeah.
But had I not had that deficit in the beginning of at the beginning of the classroom, that child wouldn't have felt comfortable saying anything to me. And that's not the first time that has happened to me. But it's
Mm-hmm.
just because as teachers, we kind of have to let go and be okay to be responsive to what our humans are needing in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to what you were saying. If we were dealing with something strong in our life, how effectively would we perform in whatever career that we're doing in that moment? So we have to remember that and focus also on that response and being okay with change. I think type A people make great teachers, but being type A works only in certain situations when you're in the classroom dealing with 25 little kids, big kids, you know.
I
But yeah.
I do. I do. Wow. That's such a powerful story. I really appreciate you sharing that with us because those are just moments that you can't get back if you think of it that way, right? And I know, like, for myself, I've never regretted spending time getting to know my students. And I know that can feel really challenging in the current classroom environment with all of the pressures and timelines and deadlines and talk of fidelity. It hurts my heart
Mhm.
that we've forgotten that this isn't about a test. And I know that they exist, right? And I know we're navigating in this unfortunate space around the importance of them. But what happens there doesn't matter if we're totally disengaging from the humans and the human element of questioning and curiosity and critical thinking. And you said something about the kids asking questions and being curious. And it made me think that I almost think that these current initiatives are killing the curiosity in our students
Mm.
because they come to us naturally curious. Humans are naturally curious beings, right? I mean, y'all have been around a toddler. I mean, why, why? Or maybe I could try this, or I could do this,
Yeah.
And kids invent things like maybe I could make a da 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 da,
Yeah.
or I could
Yeah.
think of this and that, or right. And we need space. We need space for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We just need
Mm-hmm.
we need space.
The biggest thing, man, you're so right about that curiosity piece. And often as teachers, we ask leading questions, you know?
Yes.
So
Guess what's
the
in my
best
mind,
thing,
kids?
exactly. And then, when the kid, they kind of like answering off the wall, it's shut down. So we have to make sure we're actually asking genuinely real questions And the best teaching advice I received was sitting in the silence. So when you ask a question and oh my gosh, you just imagine in your imaginary teacher brain, 1,000 hands go up, you know, or the same kid raises their hand. But being okay with silence so kids can think. Because if you don't even give them that space to do the critical thinking process, and then you ask a leading question, the kids are going to answer in a way that matches your lead. And so they're just telling you what you want to hear, the right answer, just because that is what gets affirmed. Curiosity does not get affirmed. Rabbit trails don't get affirmed. Constant questioning does not get affirmed. What gets praised is when you answer the question that the teacher tell her what she want to hear, you know?
And you do it quickly, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's so powerful. Be comfortable in the silence. This is a good action tip from today, right? Reflect on your wait time, the type of question you're asking, and your wait time. I was a professor and I worked with pre-service teachers, getting them ready to be educators. And this is something we talked about a lot because, they ask a question and it's literally like 0.5 seconds or 1 second. And they're like, no one knows? Okay, well, what about this? Or we talked about this yesterday.
Yes.
And they jump in. Y'all, pause. Just reflect on that a little bit and just take a few more seconds or just keep waiting, because here's the thing. Someone's going to fill the silence. If you allow enough space in the silence, somebody's going to fill it.
Yeah. And
even if it's with a question for clarifying.
That's what I was about to say. That's exactly what I was about to say. So adjust for that. Wait till they tell you they don't understand what you mean, instead of you assuming. And then that person was thinking, be like, okay, well, I missed it, So yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I love it. Oh my gosh. Yes. Right on the same page. Like,
yes.
You there too.
Exactly.
So I know we talked about it a little bit about how you choose texts and all these things. And I think this kind of connects with curiosity too, right? Because when I see myself now, I'm more curious. So talk to me a little bit about choosing diverse texts, using diverse texts, all the things.
Yes. That is my favorite thing. I know this is a podcast, so people can't see my background, but I've got this bookshelf with 2 lines of books. I used to have bookshelves full of books just because I am so grateful for the time that we live in, where more people who look and experience life in different ways are telling their story.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't buy them up. I'd tell my principal, you need to buy this and we need to buy this. But it's so important. And also, as teachers, we don't necessarily have time to read all the time. But so you can kind of know what diverse texts are coming out. I used to watch a lot of BookTube, like YouTubers talking about diverse YA books that came out, just so I can be in the know. And that's important because it's bigger than you purchasing a book and putting it on the shelf. You got to be able to introduce those books to kids when they're shelving through. Oh, you would like this one.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like I talk to my parents to get them to like reading. It's like how Netflix gets us to watch shows. It has to be customizable. Everybody likes something that's specially made for them. And you can't recommend a book to a child if you just bought it because the cover looked nice,
Yes.
So there is some work that you have to do on the back end to put that story in that hand of the student so they can feel like it will match what they're going through. And I see you doing a good job of this, like putting like book recommendations and on your, I've seen you girls. So it's very important. It's very important. Mm-hmm. And with that, being okay with they're not going to always love everything they read, and it doesn't have to be like this drilling situation. Like, well, what happened in the book? Did you even read the book? Just, you know what I mean? Just like let them.
I do. Like, sometimes the book's a DNR, and that's okay. Like DNF did not
DNF,
finish.
right? Yeah,
not R, not DNR. Did not.
I knew what
No.
you were saying. That's
I
okay.
know.
I know what you were
Okay.
saying.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, and that's okay. Like, but why? Like, that's a
Right.
great question. What was it about this book
Yes.
that didn't hold your interest?
Yes. Yes.
That's totally okay.
Exactly. And that's exactly when Netflix recommends something and we down it, they're like, okay, let me adjust and give you more of the stuff you like. And we got to do the same thing with our kids. So yes, diverse books, that is my jam. And you asked the second part of the question, but I got so excited about talking about books.
You know what? I actually don't even remember what the second part of the question was.
Curiosity. Curiosity. You said curiosity. And that's something else. I made this blog post. It was a while back. And I shouldn't have titled it this, but it was called Having Children Read Inappropriate Books. And by inappropriate, I mean books that are not for kids. And I'm not talking about like romance novels and stuff like that. The best way to explain this is when my mother would take us to the library, me and my little brother, and that was the only place where she could say, y'all can get whatever you want, as much as you want, because everything was free.
Right.
And so I was old. I'm older than my brother. And so I was allowed to go to the downstairs to look at the adult books. And he was so upset that he was forced to be with the baby books. And so my mom finally let him go down there. And when I'm talking about inappropriate books, I mean books where children don't know what the word means. And when I'm thinking about nonfiction books, they have a lot of pictures, a lot of diagrams, and taking it away from them because they're like, oh, you're not going to understand it. This is kind of more your speed,
I do.
Yes. So when she finally let him down there, he kept gravitating towards the ocean books and the pictures with fish. And, he was like 7, but long story short, now he's a marine biologist because we kept letting him explore and be curious. So when I talk about the type of text that we read in my tutoring sessions, I'm not just talking about pictures with Black kids. I'm talking about when I say culturally responsive, like we're reading what they're doing on NASA today. Did you know that alligators can still be frozen underwater and be alive at the same time? Let's talk about lowering the basketball hoop for men and women in NBA and WNBA. Like, that's what I'm talking about. I pull articles and we got all this AI and people scared of AI. Let me tell you something. I copy the article, I put in AI, and they take it to a 6th grade reading level. So we can still use that article, but we can change it to the language that they need. So things like that you don't expect kids to get curiosity from. I mean, like, just exposure will spark that and that desire to learn. And it's something that I now have the space to practice as an adult. I experiment with I started sewing, I started growing, I started making bread. Like, you have to practice it as well,
I do. The idea of exposure is so important. And the fact that you're culturally responsive and relevant text don't necessarily mean race. That is not what it means.
That's us. There you go. Yes.
It does not mean race. It means all kinds of things. And I think this notion about allowing kids to explore text is important, right? Because, and I would say this a lot. I taught a lot of literacy methods courses, right? There's a purpose and an intent for a reading level, and a text level is a teaching tool to help support reading. Do you as an adult look at a book and go, is this my reading level?
There you go.
You absolutely do not. You get the book because it's interesting to you, and you may or may not understand all the things that are in it, but you gather from it whatever it was that interests you. So there's being mindful of the purpose of engaging with particular texts for particular purposes is important, right? Like, my heart used to break when I would take my kids. I'd take them to like Barnes and Noble or something. And I'm like, you can pick out one book, right? And we're in the kids section. And then I would overhear another parent, and I believe they totally mean well, right? You can't choose that book. It's not in your reading level. And so I want us to be mindful as educators. What message are we sharing about that when it comes to this idea around curiosity around text? And when you're saying, let them explore, your story of your brother is a great example, right? Maybe he wouldn't have been a marine biologist if he hadn't your mom hadn't allowed him the opportunity to engage with those things. So if you have book boxes in your classroom, allow them to just put some books in there that they're interested in.
Yes. I love that. I love that.
Because they're still reading, y'all. And actually, they get to practice some more complex processes and tools with engaging with text and problem solving independently, which is what the ultimate goal is.
Exactly. Yes.
Because then they're going to ask a question. They might be like, I don't really know what does this mean?
Yeah. And that's learning. Wow. It's the purpose.
Crazy concept. Right. Because that's what you do. I mean, I always think about what you do as an adult when you are looking at something you don't understand. You go and ask questions, or maybe you go Google it now, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to go Google something that they want for. What does this word mean? Right. And, always looking it up in the dictionary isn't always very helpful because sometimes it just says the word. So,
yeah. And it's 2024, kids need videos, they need background, that is so, I love that. And especially if you're interested in it, you're going to want to know more about it. And also on the flip side, I have parents come to me and they're like, well, they just read comic books and I want them to read real books. Okay, I don't know. I think we just have this image of our avid reader just reading this big old chunk of
we have a hierarchy of what we think is a good text or a not good text. I absolutely agree with that. Comic books and graphic novels are really complex texts, y'all.
Yes.
They have to infer so much information that isn't written because they're interpreting the multimodalness between the text and the images. So it's actually a very complex text.
Thank you.
So I just needed to say that because that drives me crazy. Listening to books is also a form of reading books.
That's how I read.
Oh my God. I love me I love listening to a book, especially when you have the right narrators. I now have favorite readers that I like to listen to. I know. I'm like, ooh, this is my favorite. She does such a great job.
I love that.
Right?
I love that. Yeah.
So you can have multiple experiences, right? I tend to listen more to fiction than nonfiction. Sometimes I'll listen to a nonfiction book, but I tend to like to write in my nonfiction books. But these are all things I've learned about myself because I was afforded the opportunity to engage with a variety of texts. And I hope and want this for our students, right? Engaging with these texts. And I'm going to say an unpopular opinion. Not everyone is going to love to read. Just like not everyone loves math or history or doing the dishes or any of those things, right? We have varying degrees of love for certain concepts. But what I do think is important that everyone has the opportunity to find and be exposed to texts that they find interesting and engaging.
Exactly. And know how to seek information, whatever that looks like and whatever model that is for them. That is so important. And when you do have those like comic books, it's a good way to create somebody who's they want to avidly consume something. And instead of like looking at the phone, you are giving the comic books, they finish like that, Yes. So lean into that. And now there are some comic books that are they turn into novels. That same child I was telling you about, my first child who was reading second grader, reading on a kindergarten level, he's doing great now. One of the books he started getting into was Dragon Wings, and it's his comic book. Oh yeah. And they also have a novel version, and they've got some sort of cartoon. So, when you can just marry all this media, like I get so excited when books that I've read become novels, because now it feels like I'm, a part of this fandom. So you can create that also for your child in different ways too. So, give them that comic book, y'all. Let them read the comic book.
Yes. Let them read the comic book. Let them read the graphic novel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. I feel like I could just keep talking to you.
I don't. I love it.
I love it. Y'all, I will drop in the show notes just some folks to follow because it's important. You don't need to know all the texts that exist. There are some great people that put out diverse text lists, new book lists. I will drop some of those in the show notes for you to go follow these folks. I promote them also on my Instagram page because I think it's so important to just know what's out there and explore, and you can't know all the things. So how do you use your resources to support your ultimate outcomes for what you want to bring to your students? So exactly like Gabrielle said, you can't read all the books. There's no shame in that. Use your resources, use your tools. But as we get ready to kind of bring a bow on this today, I always love my guests to share a pro tip with our listeners, just a tip for educators who are wanting to or in the midst of engaging with this work.
I would say lean into learning from the classroom that you're going to be in. I would say don't necessarily lead with this hard outcome of, I want to go hard and be this, grand activist and all of this. Lead with empathy. And if you can lead with that and teach into that and lean into that, also giving yourself grace and not expecting, like you said, you don't have to know all of the things, but leading with and learning from the students, like that is the number one thing. Okay. The second part of that is keeping in mind that you are teaching and raising students with the goal in mind of how they can be agents of change in their communities. So almost every lesson lead and be like, okay, how can you apply this in the future? So what I would do is, and I was teaching social studies, but if you teach reading and you're getting lessons from books, math, you have to make it applicable to the real world. So I would even put my kids' names in their futures. So I would say when Rain is a lawyer and she is working on X, Y, and Z, she'll have to remember this. Or for example, if even something as small as vocabulary, I put my kids' names in vocabulary that is affirming their futures. So remember that is the goal. And if you lead with that, and that's what we talk about, passion and best intentions for our students. Take yourself out of the center.
Yes.
This is not an audience for you to, and this is something I had to tell myself, because I wanted to be a teacher I never got. So I'm thinking about teaching to baby Gabrielle. And it's like, no, get yourself out of it. Yes, be that teacher, but look at who you're teaching and be okay to share the mic. And if you have a problem doing that, change the desk around. Like that audience situation we got going. Hey, I used to change the desk up all the time, just because it decentralize your classroom. Okay. Maybe that's what the word is.
That's good.
That's good. And yes. Our classrooms reflect the capitalism that is oppressing us as teachers. Don't get me started, girl. I guess a lot to say.
That's a whole word right there. That's
yes.
Yes, they are. They are decentralized, because that brings the community piece that you've been talking about. Yep, absolutely. It's not about you. I've said that in previous episodes. I'm like, it's not about you. It feels like it is because it's quote unquote your classroom, but it's actually all of your classroom. It's a community, and you are a member of the community. You're the leader of the community, but the best leader empowers their team, and your students are your team.
Yeah. Yeah. And they start to lead.
Yes. Yes, they do.
They start to lead.
They will take it on when you give them the space to do it.
How can you see if it's working if you don't give them a chance to shine? You know? And really, y'all, we got to rethink our checks for understanding. Okay? Let's get creative with that. We got all this AI, ChatGPT. Okay, it's bigger than write an essay, answer the worksheet, answer these questions. I know it's easy, but now we have something that can do that level 1 work. Let's get into the deeper work.
Right? Well, I will push back on that a little bit. Is it really understanding if you can just fill in the blank? That feels like a whole nother episode.
It is. It is. It is. It is.
Okay, so we're gonna end on that note, y'all.
Yeah.
Remember.
Yeah.
Power your learners. Build the community.
Yes.
For engagement, critical thinking, all the things. Gabriell, it has been such a pleasure. And I'm going to put a link also to Gabriell's website in the show notes, Innovative Learners. Check her out to support your students, your kids. If you're in CPS, she's an approved provider.
I appreciate that, girl. Yes, I am.
That's amazing for my Illinois friends and colleagues, and share this out. So it has been such a pleasure. And thank you all for listening into the Dragonfly Rising podcast. If you are interested in some one-on-one and learning more about this, set up a free consultation with me. Reach out to Gabriell, get some tutoring for your kids. Yes. And remember, y'all, use your voice for good today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
This wraps up another episode of the Dragonfly Rising podcast with me, your host, Dr. Tami Dean. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember that action is always greater than inaction. How will you use your voice today?